Well, here we are. Welcome back to Beer Brackets, everybody. We're finally tackling two extremely large beer brands in different forms of episodes. We did the VS battle, Sapporo versus Asahi, and now we need to dig deep on each of these brands to find out a little bit of the history of each, just like we do with our Beer Bracket beer reviews. And we have to score them. We have to place them inside the Beer Brackets universe. We have to categorize them as it's beer, nice, good, so on and so forth, and find out where they land on our scale for historical purposes, to record them in the annals of beer history. The oldest Japanese beer brand, dating back to the late 1800s, but from, of course, the town of Sapporo, which is where the name comes from. Fred, I think this is an interesting one. This is a massive brand, and of course, Sapporo currently is a massive, massive, massive company. They've sort of engulfed a lot of different brands of beer along the way as they've gone and as they've grown. It's exciting that we're finally dissecting it in a beer review like this.
It is, my friend. And I will say, I don't know for you, but for me coming from Italy, there's not a lot of contact I've had with this beer, aside from the most recent years when I moved here. I mean, it obviously is available in Europe, and I've had it a few times, like mostly because being a huge fan of Japanese cuisine, like I've frequented also in Italy and in Europe, like many Japanese sushi places mostly, and that's a beer that you can frequently find there. I've always been like very fascinated by this beer in a way. You know, maybe it's because it's a little bit of the feeling that it comes from a faraway land, like, and it's something that it's a little bit more difficult to get. It was for me being in Italy. It always has a little bit of a fascination.
And that's interesting that you brought up that point, beer from a faraway land. Can you see on your bottle where yours is brewed?
Ooh, let's take a look.
Because Sapporo has many different breweries internationally.
Brewed and bottled by Sapporo Brewing Company, Escondido, California, and Richmond, Virginia. Look at that.
There you go. And mine is brewed in Guelph, Ontario, Canada. So we have two different versions of Sapporo, founded in 1876, which, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, makes it the oldest beer brand in Japan. So it was first brewed in the town of Sapporo by a brewer named Sebe Nakagawa. So Sege was a German-trained brewer. Was he traveling from Japan to Germany? Did he enlist German brewers to come to Sapporo and train him in the art of delicious German beer making? I have no idea. There's no information out there on this. It just says he was German trained. But you know what's interesting about that? Because recently, doing our episode on what are Mexican lagers, we picked up on the fact that the German influence is rampant, right? In all these different beer cultures.
I read too about like the German tradition that inspired the brewer, but aside from that, I didn't find like quite a lot. So I wonder if there's it's just a beer maybe that requires a little bit more digging and a little bit more exploration to find.
I think it's a mysterious beer. It is definitely a mysterious beer because for such a large brand, there's very, very little information out there about the history of it. Let us know down in the comments below. Do you know any interesting details and interesting facts? We're all about the legends. Normally very good associations with this beer. Like you said, you've had it in Japanese restaurants. You know, I really do enjoy going to Japanese izakayas, Japanese pubs, and you can always get a pitcher of ice cold Sapporo on tap. It's a standard. Let's crack them open and let's get to it.
Let's do it.
And we mentioned this in the VS battle, if you haven't seen that one. But the cans of Sapporo are just so cool. They have that indentation, the writing along the side there, script along the side. And just that clean silver look with, you know, the black and red fonts. It's just they always have a very clean look to their packaging, which is very much appreciated. All right, buddy. Aroma cheers.
Aroma cheers too, my friend. I get a strong malt presence.
Yeah.
And we might have mentioned this in the VS battle, but it's now that I'm really just purely analyzing this and smelling only this, it's really has this processed malt character to it.
It really does.
Leaning towards a slight sweetness. There is a hop presence, but the malt is really the predominant. So I would say 70 leaning towards 75% of maltiness and you know, 25% of that like hoppy presence.
Yeah.
And so it's really leaning towards the sweetness. And I don't know if it's because it's the bottle version or if it's because it's not cold enough. But like you said, I always have this memory of it being extremely refreshing on the pitcher, ice cold. But I also do remember that it always is like almost like more cold than I would normally drink beer when I usually get it in pitchers or
That's a good point.
At restaurants. So that might be a factor. Sure. I think I'm going to start cautious here. I'm going to start with a 1.5 because
okay, that's fair.
It's middle of the road. It's not. There's nothing I dislike. I might leaning a little bit more towards a 1 potentially, but it has a nice hop presence. So let's start with a 1.5. What do you think, my friend?
I have such fond memories of Sapporo just from having it. And again, there's like, I like to use this term. There's what's called the power of place, where when you're in a specific location, enjoying something, where being in a place physically adds a lot to an experience. Summarize it that way. And I think, being in a Japanese restaurant, being in a Japanese pub, in the times that I've had this beer ice cold or out of a patio, it's actually a very popular beer in Montreal. Like you'll see Sapporo umbrellas out on different bar patios and stuff. So like it's very popular here, and having it ice cold on tap is, it's a good, easy drinking lager. But in this context, it's kind of a little bit disappointing because it has that really strong processed malty, sweet aroma to it, just like a Budweiser, let's say. I compared it to Budweiser on the VS battle. I'm going to go with a 1 on the aroma. I don't think it offers too much. Now, buddy, the taste. Cheers. Let's go ahead and take a sip.
Cheers to you, my friend.
See what we think. Yeah, it kind of really fills that role, right, of that kind of lager, like a Budweiser, where it's that taste, that like really strong malty lager.
It does. It has mostly malty presence. And I think the bitterness and the hoppiness is there, but I stick with my 70-30 ratio of like mostly malt, slightly over sweet malt character to it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where so far has been scoring a little bit lower because it's not so much that it's 70-30 the ratio, but it's the character
of the malt.
Ratios. A lot of the German lagers, the ones we've had like that are from Munich, right, have a very high malt ratio compared to the hop.
I like that ratio. That's a good point to make, that you have to have that balance. Like you can't just go all malt, right? There needs to be that bitterness, the sharpness of the hops to cut through it.
Exactly, and also within that malt presence, it's fine if you do that, but it has to have some character, some bread character. Well, right. Here, like it starts like that, but then there's get most of that character. Sweetness. Exactly.
It's just
exactly.
Sweet. Yeah.
So I think actually on the taste, I'm gonna go to a 1. I hate to do that, but like there's just that there's something about that sweetness that it's not really appealing to me. Taste, I'm sorry, but 1. What do you think, my friend?
It's funny because I think we're going to swap scores here. I'm going to go with a 1.5. I think it's middle of the road for like a mass-produced lager. I don't think there's anything too offensive for me. It's just non-impressive. I think, again, if I compare it to a Budweiser, I still think it's better than a Budweiser. It tastes a little bit more, there's more quality to it than a Budweiser. So it's an elevated version of it, but it's still in that same category, which I just don't enjoy subjectively. I like more balance in my beer. I like to taste the ingredients a little bit more. I like to, like you said, some breadiness on the malt. So it tastes like fresh malt, not like processed malt, which is just like a concentrate of sweetness. Now, Mouthfeel, buddy, beer bracket tradition. We're going to do a little bit of a refresher here.
Oh, very important.
So we can get an accurate reading in our beer mouths. That's some good carbonation on it. Important to note here. How's the bottled version? Are you getting...
It has nice carbonation on it, I would say. It just doesn't stick around too long.
Okay. It definitely is like a pretty looking lager. Like it's really clear.
It is clear. It's very clean. I like the color of it.
Yeah.
Very nice carbonation character. Clean bubbles, very fine, cleanses the palate. Towards the end, there's a little bit of that like oily stickiness. But to be honest, like the carbonation cleanses the palate quite a bit from that like sweetness. So I think I'm going to go back to the 1.5. It's well done, middle of the road. I still think that it's a very well made beer considering how wide distribution it has and the fact that it's produced in so many places.
I'm going to agree with you. I'll match you on the 1.5. It's very average. When you first pour it out, it's nice. There's a stronger carbonation,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of pillowy, fluffy head that makes it really pleasant. So those first couple of sips are really nice, but that dies down really quickly. And then it just becomes kind of flat really quickly. But it still has that kind of carbonated water bite to it. But
It does.
in terms of a head, in terms of anything else that could be interesting, that disappears really quickly. So as a finish, what do you think?
You get this nice burst of bitterness that sticks around, invites you back in the glass. Because I've enjoyed it so many times with food, and this is where I think like we are analyzing in this context, we might be maybe scoring a little bit lower than if we were with food.
100%.
Because
Yeah.
I think that at this point we would have already been eating something. So you take a sip, you take a bite of food or something. So you miss a little bit that lingering sweetness that comes in right after that burst of bitterness.
That's
so on
a
the
really
finish
good
you
point.
have that.
I got to say, that's a fantastic point you're making there. Yeah. No,
Thank
it's
you,
true.
my friend.
It's true.
If I had to say one thing that like makes me score it a little bit lower than other beers is the fact that that sweetness lingers for
Yeah.
a very long time. And because we're not having any food with it, that it's not being counterbalanced. So therefore it just stays. And the more I'm drinking it, the more my palate is getting a little fatigued by that. I think I'm going to stay with a 1.5 just because I've had it with food. And I know that does a very good job in that
Yeah.
context. But I think it deserves the 1.5 because it has that potential.
I think we're in agreement here. I'm going to stick with the 1.5 as well. It's just nothing too interesting. Like that really, again, that process maltiness is really all you taste most of the way through. And there isn't much else that's interesting there. So that lingers on the finish a little bit. There's no sort of like strong bitterness from the hops to counterbalance that. And I agree with you. These beers are made to have with food. And so when you have them with food, there's something else to counterbalance that and to complement it. And then it works really well in that context. Not much there. It's not bad. It's just, yeah, average. Very painfully average. Let's put it that way.
That's a good description, my friend.
So, overall beer experience from beginning to end for Sapporo. Premium. You know, one thing I've noticed, every time a beer says premium, it's pretty average. Like, premium is like code word in the beer world for average.
I think it's because, my friend, we've gone so far off in our beer adventures that what used to be premium now for us it become average because it's what we bare minimum expect from a beer to be considered like, okay, this is right there, but we have gone to far shores, so no,
Far the
that's
shores. I would not doubt that you are 100% right with what you're saying. I think it's also a little bit of overcompensation. It's kind of like if you're calling yourself premium, I don't know. You know what I mean? It's like, if you are really premium, you don't have to say it. People just know.
That's
People get it.
true.
People get it.
That's true. That's true.
That's my humble opinion. But okay, as an overall beer experience, what do you think?
Again, I've always enjoyed this beer with food, usually Japanese cuisine, Japanese restaurants, sushi places. So it always has that association for me.
Oh, yeah.
And I will add that because I grew up in Europe, it has always had like a little bit more of a lore in sense of being a foreign beer that comes from a land that it's not nearly just right around the corner.
Exactly.
So. And because of that, like it has always had a little bit of fascination.
But no one doesn't even come from Japan anymore.
Right? Like it's Brudola.
It's like they took away the only thing that was interesting about it.
That's true. Giving it a 1.5 is fair because I think we did a disservice removing it from the context of food in a sense. But at the same time, just judging it as a beer, which is what we do here on this channel, I would say it would be unfair to go higher.
Yeah, as an overall experience, it's, again, I'll use that term, painfully average. I don't want to give it a 1 because I think it's better than a lot of beers that we've given 1s in the past. So I think, again, 1.5 I think is that sweet spot. It's right there in the middle. It's something that's done well enough that it stands slightly apart from its peers. Other sort of macro lagers that fill that space. It's marginally better. So if you're looking for something that's an upgrade, something a little bit different than, your Budweisers and your Labatt Blues, like that we get here in Canada, like that kind of, what would be an American equivalent, maybe I guess a Pabst, right? Something like that. If you're looking for something that's an upgrade on that, but in the same category with same flavor profile, this is the beer for you. You know, it says premium on it, so you can feel like you're doing something a little bit fancier. If you're having a nice night, you know, with the missus or the mister, and then you want a nicer beer, you know, go with the Sapporo. Why not? Our final scores are the same. We matched it all the way through 2.33 on 5, which in our rating system is a nice beer. It's a nice beer. It's nice.
It is.
And again, in context, right? Having with food, having it ice cold in a pub, in a Japanese restaurant, whatever it might be, you add that context to it, it takes it to another level. But as its own thing, that's where it landed.
I would still drink it at an izakaya like we did, like when I came and visit you in Toronto, or you know, going to a sushi restaurant. Like, yeah, sure, I would still have it. Like, I think it matches that kind of context very, very well.
Well, let's know, everybody. What do you think about Sapporo? And whatever you do, you know, I see the little beer bell down there. You got to click that beer bell, because what that does is it lets YouTube know that you want to hang out in the pub with us. Anytime we're in there and we're having a beer, which is about once a week, it'll let you know, and it'll be like, hey, join Alessandro in the pub, grab yourself a beer and come join them and hang out for a little bit. Forget about your worries. Sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name. You want to go down and just sit, grab your seat at the bar and have a beer along with somebody, right? And come grab a seat at the Beer Brackets pub with us.
And no matter what, don't forget to close your beer brackets.
Never forget. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.